If we're thinking about constructing the sort of campaign from sort of start to finish, then what's the perfect cadence then? And some people think about outreach just being about email. Then should people stick to that, or should they sort of mix things up a little bit?
Good question. So obviously email is my bread and butter. There are people who feel very strongly about their cold calling skills. There are people who feel very strongly about their social selling skills. But one thing I talk about a lot is balance between those three channels and becoming a triple threat. And so that means you have to get comfortable with all three of those channels in your cadence, because listen, different prospects respond to different things on different channels. And so the more you can get good at all three of those channels, the more opportunities you're going to scoop up. So when I think of a cadence and cadence design, I think of it in terms of balancing all three of those. So maybe you have 4 emails. My go-to cadence is 4 emails. It's 4 cold calls and 3 social selling touch points. So like LinkedIn Connect, LinkedIn voice message, things like that. And it's usually over a 12-day period. So one thing I've noticed, and marketers do this because we think of nurture campaigns, is it's not meant to be a marathon when you're reaching out in cold outreach. It's supposed to be, in the words of my buddy Will again, a high intensity workout. And so it should be, okay, let's try to craft this over the next week and a half. If you don't get a response by the time you hit that last step in your cadence, that's okay. It's not a no. If they didn't respond, then you have a re-engagement strategy for 60 to 90 days later that you maybe test a new cadence on. But yeah, I think of it in those terms, and you've got to have all 3 of those in your mix.
That makes sense. And do you simply sort of intersperse them together then? Email, then social, then cold call? Is there any sort of science behind that? Or is it just a case of varying it evenly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that's really important if you are testing cold outreach is that you're only going to get good data if you stay right on top of that cadence. And what I mean is if you have day 1, step 1 is a personalized email, and day 2 is a LinkedIn connection request, and you write that first email and then you get stuck in some other assignment and you write that connection request 3 days later and it pushes your next email out, whatever the case may be, it's really hard to then look at your data at the end and say, okay, this worked or it didn't work, right? You have to be very, very specific in the days and the steps that are due those days. But yeah, I'm pretty specific. It's usually email, LinkedIn request, cold call, and then it's email 2 as a follow-up, right? Maybe you're doing another cold call, you're doing a LinkedIn voice message, you're doing some sort of third email, then you're doing another cold call, you're doing a LinkedIn follow-up, and then a final bye for now email. That's it.
And I'm thinking of the practicalities of it. Obviously, when you're sat there as a marketeer, it kind of makes sense. And I can understand you sort of, aligning with sales and sort of launching something like this. Maybe coming back to it a month later and, hey, sales team, how's it going? And they're like, oh, geez, I've got, 250 tasks to do in Salesforce.
Yes.
I just haven't had the time to do it. So, do you find that's a common problem then, that sort of, I know I need to do the LinkedIn request, but actually I've got something a little bit more what I deem to be important to do?
Yes, that's always going to be a constant battle. There's going to be some reps that buy into it. And what I usually try to do in those cases to win over some of the more hesitant reps, this is going to take me too much time. I just want to call people, is show them the data of the reps that are bought in and say, look, this rep sent 50 emails today and has already booked, 2 meetings, right? 1 every 25 is about what I like to see. So, then it's oh, wait, I don't have to make 100 cold calls today. I could just focus on some really hyper personalized emails and maybe get to it. I think the other piece to this, Matt, is you have to construct your cadence in what I would consider a framework. What I mean by that is I don't like to use standalone templates, right? Hey, you can only use this template. Don't change it. Marketing is going to get mad. I like to say, hey, here is a template, but it's a building block template. here are two parts that when you do your research on this account and prospect, you change these two sentences to what you feel will make the most impact, right? There's some direction, there's some structure, but there's creative freedom, which keeps reps from getting bored and running this monotonous process. So I think the more you can make it as fun as you can for those reps that are into it, give them a little bit of creative freedom within a process, that's pretty key too.